Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, joined as always by Dave McDonald. Dave, how you doing?
Oh, I'm getting by today, man. It's been rough lately. A little sick now, and my grandma passed away this morning. So it's been rough lately. But I'm glad to get back in the swing of things with you guys.
Well, we are glad you were able to use us as a distraction. We've already sent our condolences, and we hope you're doing well. But we're glad
Definitely.
you wanted to record with us tonight because we have an amazing guest.
We do.
We
I
have
didn't want to miss it.
Yeah, we've got Jenny Butler, who's made her rounds around the podcasting world a little bit recently, but she is a high stakes NFBC player. Finished 34th in TGFBI, 50th overall in the NFBC main event in 2021, and a proud defender of Skyline Chili.
Oh God,
which I don't even know what Skyline Chili is. I've heard
that's
of
good
it.
for you. That's good for you and your bowels. So that's
yeah. I don't know. This may be a conversation for a different time, but Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thanks. How are you? I will always defend Skyline Chili to the death. It is my favorite, and anyone who doesn't know it needs to know it. And if you don't like it, you just haven't had it properly. It is the best. It is spaghetti with chili and cheese on it.
Okay, and this is a Cincinnati.
I don't understand why that's so crazy. Yes, I don't understand why that's so crazy. People think that's like so weird, and I don't get it. I don't know.
I've only been to Cincinnati one time. It was when I was in the military. I don't know if I've told you this story. It was during a 3-day blackout. I to this day do not know how I got there. It is my only experience in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Well, nothing cures a hangover like Skyline Chili.
Skyline Chili. See, I need to talk to my 19-year-old self again, and let him know that he should have gotten a bowl of Skyline Chili. That would have made everything much better. Jenny, let everybody know where you can reach on social media, and then kind of talk. You're doing some fantasy work in the industry now, so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this happened quickly. You can find me on Twitter at JennyButler830. I started out, Vlad Sedler was kind enough to ask me to write something for his 5-tool FTN fantasy draft guide, which was great. I put together a little article in that on roster construction. And that's a great guide. It's got some other really good people writing in it, like Phil Dussault wrote a great article on saves. There's some good stuff in there. And then I turned both Rotoballer and Fantrax both got in touch with me and asked if I wanted to write for them this season. So I haven't put anything out yet, but I'm working on it, and hopefully you will see me in one of those two places this year.
Well, that's awesome. I think it's great that both Fantrax and Rotoballer scooped you up, and of course Vlad is doing amazing things over at FTN. So I'm looking forward. I've already read your piece over on the FTN guide. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do over at Fantrax and Rotoballer. But let's talk some fantasy baseball. We're keeping you up way past your bedtime.
Let's do this in the middle of the night. Jeez.
I don't think we have any housekeeping, right? There's no notes. Oh, no. I think I need to remind people, 5-star reviews. 5-star reviews. If you can help us out, we haven't been asking for those really at all. It's been a long time since we got them. So if you're on Spotify or Apple Music and you want to help us out, 5-star reviews really, really do a lot for us. Also, TGFBI season is going on right now. And if you want to get into a TGFBI satellite to win your way in to TGFBI next year, you can do that. Go to tgfbi.com. The first 9 leagues started drafting today. I've got another one full and another 2 full. They're going to start on Wednesday, and one that's filling up right now. So they're going to be all on Fantrax. So if you can't play on NFBC, hey, you can play on Fantrax. And it's been a lot of fun so far. Some interesting draft boards already. So definitely get in on that. So with that,
if you want to join us in Earth, because all 3 of us are members of Earth, Justin in the original Barf League and Jenny and I in the victorious league last year, Glarf. We are definitely still looking for some people in some of our leagues. I know specifically Texas Could use some people because a couple people just dropped out. And Russell from Armchair Roto, Russell Withers is the guy to get in touch with there. Or you can just get in touch with me because I'm trying to get all these new leagues set up. But we're going to have 10 leagues in Earth this year. So I'm really excited about that. And
that's crazy.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
awesome.
I mean, the charity aspect of it is awesome. And we're going to have different trophies for different areas. It's really cool. And everybody's getting really into it. I'm really excited for where this is going because people are finally going to get to like meet up in person. And it's kind of like NFBC, but for lower stakes. Like you can actually, like people who can't afford to, $1,700 entry fee in NFBC, join Earth. You can play for as little as $25 depending on your league. I encourage more, like we do for ours is $150, but $20 of that entry fee goes towards charity. And yeah, I'm just I'm so excited to draft this year. We're drafting from Glarf member Sarah Sanchez's apartment complex party room, which looks amazing. So
I got my hotel booked. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you're going down there for like what, 5 days or something, or you're going down Wednesday or Thursday?
No, not to Chicago. I'm just going to go 2 nights, but
okay.
I got to stay because like I'm the one going the furthest, so it's a 6-hour drive for me each way. So
yeah,
I'm gonna take a couple nights there, but it'll be good.
Yeah,
I love Chicago.
I'm really looking forward to it. So if you guys want to get involved, even if the leagues are already filled, we can always put you on the wait list, and new leagues are going to be forming next year too, I'm sure. So we're going to keep kind of splitting up until we can keep filling more and more leagues. So yeah, with that, Jenny, let's kind of get into a little bit of your time with NFBC. I know you started 2013 playing basketball, actually, with an online championship and a satellite, which is NFBKC for basketball. And then you moved to baseball in 2014 with an online championship. And you never really looked back as you kind of dropped basketball from your repertoire and expanded your investment in baseball. So what led you to NFBC, and what was with the start in basketball, and what made you switch to baseball?
Well, I was already in my home baseball league, but I had gotten myself into a great sort of home, quote unquote home. It was people online basketball league that I loved. It was actually a salary cap league. And I'm not saying that like an auction. I'm saying like a legit salary cap league where you had whatever at the time, I can't remember what the number was, but you had the real NBA salary cap to work with. And then you had real NBA player salaries were what you worked with. So you could roster, it was a draft, so you couldn't all have the same guys, but it was a snake draft that way. And so like, for instance, Kobe Bryant was not owned on anybody's team back then because he was so expensive that it was not profitable to have him on your team. So it was like a whole other layer of strategy that I really loved to it.
Yeah. I played a league like that for baseball.
Yeah, when that dropped, I was like, I want to play some basketball somewhere, because I was kind of in it. And so I found that. And then, I was already playing fantasy baseball, and I loved that. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts and listening to people talk about NFBC. And since I was already on the site, I started checking it out. And over time, I just sort of lost my, it wasn't my interest in basketball, but, I just didn't have time to put in the work for it. So I just dropped the basketball and went straight to baseball, and I've been baseball ever since, with an potentially increasing number of leagues every year.
Yeah, you've really been increasing year over year. Now you said you heard people talking about this is back in 2013, 2014. Where were you hearing people, like Sirius XM or something?
I couldn't tell you, and I was thinking about this earlier today, that I was thinking that I must have heard it on a podcast, but I honestly don't remember. It's possible that I just, when I was on the NFBKC, somehow just sort of, was searching around and found it. I feel like I remember hearing somebody that was playing it talking about it then, though, but I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, we've gone from NFBC not really having much of a presence within the industry itself to dominating the talk of the industry. Like,
it's crazy.
The last probably 4 or 5 years have been just insane in terms of the industry's popularity, in terms of like how much we talk about NFBC, ADP, the main event leagues, TGFBI, other leagues like that. So you played your first main event in 2017. What made you want to jump into that kind of like high stakes atmosphere, because it's one thing to play in a $50 league or $150 league. It's another thing to go, I'm going to drop almost $2,000 on a singular league.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly making the decision, but I know that a lot of it had to do with the fact that it was in Vegas. I go to Vegas a lot, and I'm used to live drafts. My home league is a live draft, and so I really only was interested in doing live drafts. And I wanted to move on from my home league to a little bit more serious league. Like my home league is great. It's actually a very tough league, but there's only maybe about half of the guys in it that are like serious about it. So there's always like a competition at the top, and there's some of those guys are really good players. But then there's like sort of a group at the bottom that is sort of there for fun and for the camaraderie of it and the friendships, because we've been playing it for 25 years. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to try it out and see how I could do with people who were like fully serious about it. And when I saw that they have the live drafts in Vegas, and it's during March Madness, so that's cool, and you can just go out there and draft, I was like, yeah, I got to try this. And I've been doing some sports handicapping for a long time before that, and so I have sort of a bankroll of my gambling money and my fantasy money kind of are all the same pot. So I just sort of was like, well, this it's instead of going out there and just betting $1,700 on various basketball games, I just decided to put it into this league and see what I could do with it. But in the first one, as most people do, you get your ass handed to you. So
do you feel like you weren't properly prepared for your first one? Because like I know for me, like you said, my first one, I got absolutely shellacked, and I just was not prepared for the level of competition. I thought I was, like, in my head, I was like, I'm ready, I can do this, like, but
yeah.
So did you feel like you were prepared by, like, in retrospect, were you prepared enough for it?
It wasn't as much, I guess. I mean, I think I was prepared with the player pool more or less, but I wasn't prepared for the sort of intimidation of walking into the room for the first time. Especially, I don't know if it was more this way in 2017 than it is now, or if it was just the league that I happened to be in. I was in the league with like Hausman and Stat Miller and Joe Berg and Don Warner and like a bunch of like much older men than me. And so I walked in there and was just like, oh shit, like, what is this? And I was a little bit thrown off that I wasn't, fully invested in my computer in front of me, I was sort of distracted. And then I just wasn't as prepared for people jumping ADP and stuff like that. Like I was thinking people would make it back to me that didn't. And then I did the thing that I did again in 2019, didn't learn my lesson, did not sit down and read the news in the last final hour before the draft. And I looked this up today, in like 5th or 6th round, I drafted Sungwon Oh. You remember him from the, yes, well, Scooter Jeanette was 2019.
Oh, okay.
But I drafted Sungwon Oh, the guy that we thought was going to be the closer for St. Louis back then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then maybe 5 rounds later, somebody drafted, I want to say it was Coda Glover. It might have been Coda Glover. And I was like, who is that? What? Who? And I look it up and I see the news that he was declared the closer instead of the guy I had just taken in the 5th round. And it was just like, and I've learned now not to let that stuff upset me as much. But at the time, that stuff just throws you off. And, you're just like in your head going, oh, I made this mistake. And, I'm in this room with these guys. They don't know who I am. And I just, made a mistake in front of them. They're going to think I'm an idiot, all this stuff. And you get in your head. And so I think that threw me off. And then anytime it's your first experience with the fab situation, you're not going to do as well as you could. Yeah. You learn over time the fab situation. So I think that's a big part of why people always struggle in their first year is, just fab. Ugh.
Yeah, it's an intimidating thing to come into, and you, as a woman, I'm sure it's magnified greatly. And for me, I was 23 when I first did it, and I was literally like the next youngest guy in the room was like late 40s. So I was just like, oh my God. They're like, hey, small child, where's your daddy?
I don't think anybody's ever looked at you, Dave,
that's true.
And said small.
Yeah, that's fair. I was still 6'4" back then. So, Yeah, so it was still intimidating though, because all these people know what they're doing. They're much more comfortable there, and they've been doing this for
They all
years.
know each other too, so they're all like,
Yeah,
"Hey, how's
yeah,
it going?" Hugging each other and stuff, and I'm like, "Oh
yeah,
god." You can immediately tell in the room who like the most respected guys were.
sure.
Like John Stadmiller had everybody coming up to him and like kissing the ring and stuff. It was the whole thing.
There's a little bit of that sometimes, yeah. But
Yeah.
overall, it's I found it to be very welcoming over the years, like in
Yes.
people
Yes.
very open and friendly to talk to about stuff for the most part. It's like any other group, you're gonna find some people who are not as inclined to share with you things and stuff like that. But for the most part, people love to sit around and talk about their draft boards. But
Oh,
so you talk about
yeah.
2017, but then in 2018 was kind of your breakout year where you cashed in 4 out of 6 contests, including second place in the main, 30th overall, and first place in a cut line, 32nd overall. What big changes did you make from 2017 to really take that step forward, or was it just being more comfortable now?
I think it was more being more comfortable and more experienced. So for the first few years, I think I've told this story before, but in the first few years that I played in the main event, I tried very hard to research the entire player pool, like spend time looking at each guy. And I've since sort of stopped doing that. But I think when I started doing that, it probably was a help initially, going to, after 2017, I realized how much work it was going to take. And I started, doing more off-season work and learning the players a little bit more in depth. And so that probably helps some, but a lot of it just is the experience, I think.
Well, then last year you had another amazing year. Seven cashes, including a second in the main, the 50th overall. Like I mentioned, you and Rob DiPietro finished second in the tag team league, which was, I think, going back and forth between.
It was we were like an RBI out of first or something.
Yeah,
there was like 9 teams battling for first place in like the last couple of weeks. It was insane.
Yeah,
it was one of the most competitive leagues, top to bottom, that I've ever been a part of.
Yeah,
for sure.
Then second in TGFBI league, 34th overall. Like, why were you so successful in 2021?
So I think 2019 was a disaster. I don't know what, I still don't exactly know what happened, but 2019 sucked. Every league sucked. So then we had that long off season before 2020, and I sort of revamped what I was doing. I actually had a pretty good year. 2020, the results don't look good, but I had a pretty good year. I was in first in my main until like a week left, and I finished in fourth, stuff like that. So I had a couple leagues that I just lost at the end. I know that in 2020, I was leading my TGFBI satellite and ended up losing that. I was leading my first pitch Arizona league and lost that. You know how it is. But the difference that I made, I think, was instead of trying to learn every player, I stopped doing that and just decided that like that wasn't a good use of my time. I was spending so much time. I was only getting through 5, 6, 7 players a night. So I'm spending all of December, January, and February just looking at individual players. And then I would get to drafts and realize like I had never taken a step back and really looked at the big picture. So so what I decided to do was figure out where the best places to pull data from was, figure out what projection systems I liked, and modify those projection systems a little bit here and there. And then just spend time looking at my whole draft sheet, as a whole. So I take the draft sheet that I use, I create new every year. I pull names out of it, and then I will use the projection system that I choose. I usually use some sort of a combination of ATC and the BAT. And then, you do some calculations with it, and I pull in information from all different sources. I have some stuff from last year in it. I have some stuff about like where they're going to be in the lineup, how many injured days they've had recently, just lots of different things from all different sources pulled into one place. And then that gives me time to just look at everything top to bottom and think about stuff like roster construction, because what I sort of thought was spending time looking at the details and the XWOBAs and whatever of all these players is not getting me an advantage over other people. So where is my advantage? Probably it's in the game theory and the roster construction. So, all of that stuff, all of that XWOBA nonsense is all factored into these projections. If they're good projections, it's all in there. So I don't need to spend my time dissecting all of the advanced stats on every player. Use the projections, modify them a little bit if you don't agree with them, but for the most part, trust them.
And it's the same information that everybody
yeah.
else is working with, so you
Yeah,
definitely don't get an
yeah.
advantage by looking at the same stuff that everybody else sees.
Yeah, so just like how to put together a team seemed like a lot better use of my time, you know?
Absolutely.
You're going to Vegas this year, as am I and Dave.
Yeah.
We're all going to be there. What events are you going to be playing in there?
I am going to do 2 main events and 2 auctions. So last year I did the auction for the first time and loved it. I actually ended up joining at the last minute. I was in a super and it got canceled. And so I switched up to an auction, and I didn't really have a whole lot of time to prepare for it. I just sort of night before went through some values in my head of like how to break out my team, how much I wanted to spend. And then just basically took auction value, like preset auction values in with me and kind of worked off of those. But I want to do 2 auctions because I love them, and 2 main events.
You should have joined the Super last year and drafted Cody Bellinger, thus saving him from being auto-drafted to my team.
Well, what I want to avoid, though, I mean, I'm out there to do a live draft, so like I don't want any. I'm like keeping a close eye because my second main event only has me in it so far. It's on the 28th. So I'm worried that a lot of people will have left by then, and I'm going to be very careful to not have it be accidentally online.
Yeah, no, I mean that kind of takes away the whole
Yeah,
purpose
that's what I'm there for.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean they're definitely harder. The live leagues are way harder in my opinion than the online leagues, but it's so worth it for the experience of it. I
think they're easier. I mean, the competition's harder. The competition is hard for sure, but I think the physically being in a room and drafting is easier because I don't have to constantly be switching back and forth between looking at a draft room and looking at my sheet. I can just look at my sheet and hear the picks coming in and cross them off as I'm going. I don't have to constantly switch windows. So for me, that's easier.
And do you have a co-drafter with you, either live and or online? No? You're always just by yourself?
Only the first time I've ever shared a team was with Rob last year, which was so much fun. And we can't do it this year because he's got a lot going on, and we're going to try and keep our workloads a little bit lighter this year. But but maybe next year, we can get back into it. But
so to clarify, I didn't mean not a co-manager, like not like you share a team, but actually just someone who helps you facilitate the draft, like my friends used to do for me when I was doing it. It helps to have someone there with you.
I get that sort of, but I also feel like if I'm thinking about something, I don't necessarily want somebody like in my ear. I don't know. I'd have to try it, I guess.
You can instruct them.
I feel like it would be distracting.
If I ask you for your opinion, well, they can do certain things that you don't like. They can cross off names on like a master list, and you kind of like macro, micro, like one of you can focus on one, the other, and like you're just asking them for like information, like who's left under this position, or they're crossing off all the names for you, or entering it into a spreadsheet. I mean, and if it doesn't, if that's not your process, that's fine. I feel like it helps me stay organized, but if it's my league, my friends don't give me input. Well, they do sometimes, but I ask for it if I want their input. Otherwise, I just overrule it because it's my league.
It might be worth trying. I've thought about bringing my partner to my auctions because in our home leagues, he's the best auctioneer in the room, and he's really good at doing all that. I mean, you don't really need to do the math in your head because at NFBC, all the numbers are up there, but he's really good at auction strategy. So I thought about asking him, but I also think that might be distracting. So I have to think about it.
Okay, fair enough.
Speaking of auctions, I got some auction questions for you. Doing an auction like an NFBC style where you've got the overall, right? What kind of strategies might be different than like someone's home league auction, or is it same?
So for me, this last year was the first NFBC auction I did, and I pretty much tried to build a team like I would a main event team. So I didn't really treat it that much differently, other than it's sort of easier to get. You're not at the mercy of KDS and where you are in the draft order. Mm-hmm. But I need to do some work on it because last year I did not get a good balance. I drafted too much speed, and I won steals by like 30. And I ended up finishing 4th in the league, which was one home run out of 3rd. so 1 home run out of the money. And I got way too much speed, didn't get enough power. I got power, but it was Jorge Soler and Eugenio Suarez, and those guys ended up hitting home runs, but like I didn't start them a lot of the time, and it was the power guys I got were not good. So I don't know. I need to work on. I had my values written out and balanced out. I didn't necessarily have the categories written into where, like, I didn't match up the dollar values that I wanted to spend with where I was going to get the categories, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to work on that. So I don't know. But other than that, it's plus, as soon as the auction's over, it's essentially the same as the main event format wise. So, I just like going in there and, having a shot at everybody and the bidding process and all that. It's just fun,
Do you have a nomination strategy? And I am taking notes because we may be in the same auction.
So it's funny, I hear like, you're not going to get anything because I got nothing. I hear like, I've heard you say it and Ariel Cohen say it, like it's like playing poker and you're, watching people bid and your auction nomination strategies and stuff. I don't really have any of that. I probably will have some guys in mind that I want to put up. But I'm always open. There's not any guys that I necessarily do want and don't want. I'll put up a guy that maybe I think I'm probably not going to be interested in, but then if the bidding stops at a certain amount, sure, So I don't know. I mean, I can see the strategy of, getting some money off the table. Like, if you already have a utility guy, then nominating all the other utility guys to get some money off the table, stuff like that. But
I actually
don't really
do
have
the
anything.
opposite of that in a lot of auctions. I tend to nominate the guys I want early, so that way I can know if I can afford them.
Yes,
because often it's the guy who's the last of a tier that goes for the most amount of money. So I typically, if I've got a guy, especially in a thin tier, I'll throw that guy out early, so that way I can see whether or not I can afford the one I want, as opposed to waiting to find out I have to overpay.
Also, I can tell you from last year. Sorry, I was just going to say, I can tell you from last year that I was shocked at how high closers were going. And I had, that's an easy thing to say, this year the whole thing is closers are expensive, whatever. But even compared to last year's main event values and last year's average auction values that I was looking at, they were going way higher. And I ended up overpaying, maybe not, he's all right, but I paid a lot for Kenley Jansen in the end because he was like the last guy. And I was like, I'm about to get shut out. So I paid like $19, $20 for Kenley Jansen, which, is fine. But yeah, I was surprised. That caught me off guard at how much the closers went for.
I was also going to say, I think if you were building a strategy around a linchpin, like if you were going to pretty much avoid steals other than making sure you got, Mondesi, like you're gonna have to throw him out early to make sure you get him and then build your team around him. Because like if you start building your team and it's with in mind that you're going to be taking him later and then you don't get him, then your whole strategy is screwed. So if there's a guy that your whole strategy revolves around, you got to make sure you throw him out early and get him and then pivot if it doesn't work out.
I did that last year because I was going to get Merrifield. I wanted Merrifield. I was in a good spot draft position wise to get Merrifield in both my main events. Didn't get him. The auction was after that, and I was like, I'm getting Merrifield, And then I also ended up with Jose Ramirez, and I also
you listening, Jake?
Yeah, no, that's not. I mean, that was last year, but yeah, I was all about getting him, and then I also was all about getting Jose Ramirez, and that probably wasn't the wisest combination.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that people often make in auctions is the idea that they shouldn't throw out people they want. That you should soak up money. It's great to soak up money, but you want to make sure that you're not in a bidding war over the guy that you want, and that you have a chance to then pivot to someone else. If for some reason Trevor Story is your guy and he starts going $33, you're like, oh no, maybe not. You want to have that ability to pivot off of them, and so if you wait too long to throw out your quote unquote your guy, for instance, in Tout Wars last year, I threw Cedric Mullins out first and got him for $1.
Yeah, sometimes that can backfire though, because when everybody's got all their money, it's easy to say 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. So you might not get them for $1, but I'm sure if you had paid 2 or 3, obviously that still would have been fine.
But I'd rather pay 2 or 3 than not get them at all.
True.
So especially if I think there's a chance he can make me 8 or 9.
Yeah, because I think one thing that people think is at the end of auctions that everybody's out of money. There's some people who have mismanaged their money and have way too much money at the end, and so they're throwing $11 at $1 to $2 players. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're throwing out guys that you want and you're unable to get them because of shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
absolutely. You talked about, or I think Dave mentioned that you played basketball starting first. Do you still play other sports, or are you strictly baseball now?
I do play other sports. I don't play basketball anymore, although I would like to get back into a basketball league. I think that would be fun. I play some fantasy football. I have 2 home leagues that I barely pay attention to, but like fantasy football, I literally set a lineup and made injury replacement pickups, and I won one of my 2 leagues. But I did this year.
I won my first NFFC league this year.
Did you? Derek Van Riper was kind enough to ask me to join his pentathlon league, which was so much fun. It's 5 separate, contests. There's an auction, roto style. It's points, but it's like roto standings essentially. It's not head-to-head. And then there was a best ball. There was a picks against the spread. There was a survivor and a DFS component to it. And so the combined standings of all of those were made one winner. You got points for winning each, or money for winning each leg, and then points for money for overall. And I made 3rd. That's pretty nice. I can do the handicapping part.
Is that a Cincinnati Bengal we're hearing in the background?
No, I'm trying to get somebody to come get this cat. This is a thing. So I have never had a cat appear on a podcast until the last one. And now it's like a thing. There's a paw coming under the door. But I can't. So I have noise canceling earbuds.
Oh, we can hear. We can hear the cat meowing. Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's a really cool format. I play in a 3-sport league, which does a similar thing where, you get money for, each individual sport, and then for the overall. And in the Dynasty version of it, I won it last year on my winning football and winning baseball. I suck at that.
I want to get into one of those 3-sport leagues.
It's
that would
the
be so much
coolest.
Fun.
It's the coolest draft I've ever been a part of. Because first round, someone's taking Christian McCaffrey, someone's taking Shohei Ohtani, and someone is taking LeBron James or whoever, Jokic, whatever, I know absolutely nothing about that. I finished 9th in basketball.
I would get my partner to do that. He's into basketball, but we also play.
That'd be a good one to have a partner for.
Yes, I'm in golf. I love my golf league, and I'm also in Premier League fantasy.
Wow.
And then I play. So there's a guy that I've been friends with. He lives all the way out in Washington State, but I met him through a pool that we used to do, and he runs some amazing pools. Like, he has a site that he does. It's called runmypools.com, and he runs all kinds of crazy pools. And so I am constantly in like 3 or 4 of his pools. Like, they're cool. Very inventive ones, and he does really a good job with it. So I'm constantly doing that too, so that gets that itch.
And so we know you play NFBC. Do you play any other formats? Do you play Fantrax at all, or Yahoo, or ESPN?
I have 2 home leagues, and those are both on Fantrax. My one home league that has been going for 25 years is a really fun league. It's a hybrid. So we do each off season, we nominate 8 players from our team for the year before. And then it's a 14-team league. So those 112 players go into an auction, and we auction off those 112 players. You put up your own player for auction, the bidding happens, and then you have the option for keeping that player for $1 more than the highest bid. So it's semi-keeper, semi-auction. And the other thing that I like about it is that you can get as many players as you want out of that 8 rounds. So like, some people will get 10, 11 players at a cheaper price. I tend to go more of like getting 5 high-priced players, because I know that I have the knowledge of the player pool to get guys in the draft. So once those 8 rounds are over of auction, we just snake draft, and you just till everybody's team is filled up, so it's all even. But it's a deep league. It's a holds league. I've been playing holds since the beginning. I will always advocate for holds. I think it's much better solds. But yeah, my home league is great. It's a whole weekend. We have a barbecue the night before, and then between the auction and the draft, it lasts like 9 hours of the day on Saturday.
Yeah, it's
awesome. It's a bunch of really good friends.
You're on mute, Dave. So if you were saying something, we couldn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. My bad. I was just saying that sounds exactly like my boy Tony. He's big on solds. He hates the saves, and we were talking about that when we had Derek on, and Derek's like, "Well, too bad it's not changing."
Yeah, I would love that. I would love it.
He also Tony's also big on. I mean, he lives in Cincy, so he's big on Skyline Chili too. So you two have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the best high stakes player in the world, and why is it Phil?
So I think that people trying to follow what Phil did last year are making a big mistake.
Yep.
I would be very surprised if Phil is doing what Phil did last year, because he's smart enough to know that what worked last year isn't necessarily going to work this year. So, obviously he's great. He can do all the programming and stuff. But I think John Pausma's like one of the best. He's also been awesome. Yeah, and he's so great to talk to when you go to Vegas and stuff. But one of the most underrated players, I think, is Abdul Madani, and I've never met him. I think he only drafts online, as far as I know. But in 2018, when I finished second and 30th overall, he was like 3rd or 4th overall, and maybe top 10, I know. And then he won the next year. I mean, like, he has gotten some crazy finishes, and I have no idea who he is or anything, but that guy's good.
Yeah,
he's been in 2 of my main event leagues and done very, very well.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
I like that. I like that you're kind of putting a spotlight on some people who don't get talked about, because those guys are both great.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to win the main event in 2022? Who is your prediction? Give us a bold prediction.
Other than
why is it me?
I'm not picking any of you. I think I might say Tyler Jung. That guy, he's another really, really good player, and he did really well last year. If Phil hadn't had the year that he had, people would have been talking. But also, I've played with him. I just did the $1,000 draft champions with him, and his team is really good. I'm worried about that team. But also Brian Slack and Nick Sackett are a powerhouse combination. Nick Sackett was in my that $1,000 draft champions too, and he was right next to me and sniped me so many times it drove me insane. So like, I think those guys are all like a good bet.
I think when we had Jason DuPont on High Stakes Heat, I think I asked him, it was someone that we had on, and I can't remember, but I know someone said Brian Slack was their pick. And yeah, Nick Sackett too. They usually partner, and they're both very, very good players.
Yeah.
Tyler Jung had 3 top 25 overall finishes in the main event last year. I mean, insane year.
That's crazy good. I mean, and I do always tell people, like, you have to look at how many entries they have, but if you have 3 in the top 25, even if you had like 20 entries, it's still really good. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes people are like, well, they had 3 first place finishes, and I'm like, okay, but they had 30 leagues, so I don't know. It's like not great, but in his case, I don't think he played that much, but it doesn't matter. If you have 3 in the top 25, like that kind of consistency is really good. I think it's going to be really
interesting. Who has the most entries in the main event? I wonder what the most entries is.
Oh, that's a good question.
Do people do more than 10? I feel like nobody's doing more than 10.
Well, no,
hard to because
Abdul Madani did in 2020. He did I want to say 12.
Wow.
Oh wow,
that's crazy. Okay. That's so
but
much.
But
work.
they were all online in 2020, right? I mean,
but it's so much work in season.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be really interesting coming off of, because last year the people who did really well, like Phil, knew how to regress correctly, and people like me didn't do a good job of that. I mean, I still had a good year, but it was all through Fab and everything. Like my drafts were much worse than they usually are last year. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see this year who not only could adapt last year really well, but then coming off of a normal year, because Phil has said, like, I don't have the advantage this year that I had last year with everybody coming off of a full season. I don't have that same edge that where people were valuing 2020 too highly anymore. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But how do you see the high stakes game changing since you started back in 2014-ish? And what are you doing to adapt, and where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, I think that it's mostly the explosion of content, like when, like you were saying, like, how did I get into it? I don't even know. I mean, if anybody was talking about it on a podcast, it probably wasn't very much. And now it's just all over. Everybody's got their players, everybody's got their strategy, and everybody likes to copy what has worked for other people the year before. So I think what I need to do to adapt is to try to, do my own thing and not try to copy and not try to, get too saturated with everybody's opinion, and just make sure that I'm doing, what works for me. Because, it's even build wise, what somebody else can do really well might not be what I can do really well. So just copying, like, Toby's pocket aces, that is something that I have done before. That was a thing before it had a name. But it might not work for somebody else, and taking early closers might be great for some people and not for others. So just like, listening to podcasts and then just doing what they tell you to do isn't necessarily going to work for you.
Right. And Toby coined the term, but like you mentioned, people have been drafting pocket aces for a long time, just never called it that. It's in the end, NFBC is kind of very different, because NFBC live drafts really showed the true value of aces, because other people coming from other formats would wait on pitching, and they'd be like, oh, well, I can get, Garrett Cole in the mid-second round or something. And then NFBC was like, no. Pitchers should be going way earlier. But every other format, you can wait on pitching for the most part, unless you've got people coming over from NFBC to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Knowing your format is the biggest deal.
It really is. And everyone has different you have different ways that you can exploit them. And I think people need to look into the rules and think about strategy more, and think about player evaluation a little less.
So when we got to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, comparatively anyways, like, I'm not saying not to do your player evaluations, but put more time relative into the strategy parts, which I don't think, like you've mentioned, I don't think people do enough of.
Yeah, when we got to Arizona, you guys were both in the DC in Arizona, and I was in the best ball. And, I know that none of us like did a lot of preparation for our Arizona draft, because it was, free and it was fun and all that. Yeah.
Zero.
But we got into that draft, and I don't think anybody else in the room, maybe some people who didn't really speak up, but most of the people in the room didn't know what the scoring was for an NFBC best ball. Like, if you didn't even looked at what the scoring is, I mean, all you had to do going in was take a set of projections, put in the scoring, and spit out some points. It's a points, best ball is points based. So like, all you had to do was 10 minutes worth of effort to get some points. But people, even if they had heard, some of them, I don't even know if they knew it was points, but people assume that when they hear points, they think that it's more of an OBP based point scoring system, and NFBC isn't like that. There's no points for walks. So like Jason Collette was running it, and he had me read out to everyone what the scoring was. I just read out to the room what the scoring format was before we started. And it's just like, you got to know that stuff, before you go in.
Yeah, I put it in the strategy section of the SP Streamer Draft Guide, but I highlighted the differences between NFBC and Fantrax best ball leagues, because they're very different scoring and different rosters. And if you don't know this stuff, like, number one rule whenever you sign up for a league is know your league rules. And granted, I screwed up last year because I did my first Fantrax draft and hold league, which I was assuming would be like NFBC's Draft Champions, because a lot of their games they ripped off from NFBC. So I was like, oh, it's got to be the same thing, right? Well, no. Fantrax Draft and Holds allow you to make midweek changes for pitching, which I did not realize, which is a huge strategic point there, where you want to make sure you're much heavier on quality, starting pitching in a league where you can make midweek changes. So, you really have to know your league going in. And again, we've all done it. We've all been lazy and didn't look it up and made assumptions, but
I thought you were going to say that you didn't read the rules and know what time your draft started at.
You're never going to live that down, you know.
Absolutely.
Same way I'm never going to live down Skitter Jeanette. This is your thing.
Not with this asshole as my co-host. No.
I'm never going to live down my first main event draft. I could win the main event. I could win the main event overall, and people will still talk about.
Nope.
Yeah.
But come on, I mean, seriously, how many other people can say they missed the first several rounds of two different drafts and still won and cashed both of them? So
cry me a river. You got drafted Tatis.
Okay, but Jenny, so you were one of the people who actually knew my plans because we were discussing it, and I told you who I was going with in the first round, right?
I don't remember what you said. I do remember talking about it.
We both had pick 7, and we were discussing Trey Turner versus Shane Bieber, and I said I'm going Trey Turner. And then I said, and then I'm gonna get Woodruff on the comeback in the second round. So
that's exactly what I did too at that 7th spot in my main event. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, Cry Me a River, I got Tatis, but Turner and Woodruff is infinitely better than Tatis and Bellinger, because Bellinger was an active negative for me. You mentioned this on SP Streamer. Actually, you were talking about how you waited too long to discard players like Mike Moustakas last year, and that was like a big lesson that you took from last year moving forward to this year. I held on to Cody Bellinger the whole damn year because it was like he was out for it was gonna be a couple weeks, okay, and then that couple weeks turned into a month and a half, almost 2 months, and then he'd come back and then he'd hit a home run. You're like, oh, maybe he's back, and then he went back to sucking again, and he just kept sucking and sucking and sucking. But there was points where you thought maybe he might break out of it. It's really hard to drop that second round pick, but yeah, Phil was like, why didn't you drop him 2 months ago? And I'm like, man, shut up. Like, this is my second round pick. It's hard. It's, I mean, I didn't even like the guy. I hated Bellinger. He was the guy I was completely out on last year and ended up on my team, which sucked, but it's hard to make those drops.
Yes.
I think what it comes down to, and I heard you talking about Soler, Soler got unlucky. Like, his home run per fly ball rate was way, way, way low. And then towards the end of the year, when he started to break out, it was because that was starting to regress back to, it was starting to normalize. So I think you have to look into the stats and to figure out, okay, is this something that is luck based, or is this like their skill has regressed? So I think with Bellinger, there was other factors with his shoulder and with his changing of his mechanics. Where I should have just let him go.
I think, especially the changing of mechanics. That to me is the big issue with Bellinger, and the reason why I'm still out on Bellinger, and we'll talk about that. Just the whole change. It reminds me too much of BJ Upton. In the way that BJ Upton would change his mechanics all the time and go from being great to being awful all of a sudden. So,
and why do you change mechanics if you're a former MVP? Like, it's one thing if you're changing your mechanics
coming off the MVP season,
right?
Straight off of the MVP season.
So that was a red flag for me, because it's like, if you're coming off of MVP, you're not looking to change things. You're looking to do more of the same. So my first thought was, okay, there's probably something injury related here, or something that's not working for him. So
some guys just like to tinker. Some guys, I mean, that's, Trevor Bauer is notorious for this over his career. Is
but Bauer's results weren't good early on. Remember, he used to be like a 4.5 ERA.
But that's the thing. When you're a tinker, you don't know what the results are going to end up being. They could make you even better, or they could make you worse. But some guys just don't like to stick with what they've been doing. It's just,
and I don't know. Maybe I don't know if Bellinger is a tinkerer or not. But for me, it was a red flag, and I was like, okay, I don't want to take a guy. Obviously, it was not part of my plan. So speaking of plan, Jenny, let's get a little bit of your process as a high stakes player. Do you evaluate from the back to the front, kind of looking and seeing what resources you can get that are available late, like positionally and, steals, homers, that kind of thing, so that you know what you have to get early? Or do you draft strictly based on values? Do you cross players off? I know that you also use SGP. So how do you kind of bring those elements together?
Yeah, so once I went through this a little bit in that draft guide article, but I put in there an example of what I do. Once I've gone through, I use the projections to come up with SGP, and then I do an evaluation of each position. And as I'm doing that evaluation of each position, I am looking at different pockets of where I like to draft guys. So, I'm looking at, okay, well, I like some of these sort of second tier first basemen, but if I don't get one of those, I want to wait till later and get, but where is the last guy that I'm willing to get as my starter? Where's the last guy that I'm willing to get as my corner infielder? And I have those all kind of mapped out in a spreadsheet, each position. So then I can see how all those stack up against each other. Maybe like in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, there's 5 different positions that I want to fill in that spot. Maybe I'm looking at a pitcher there and a second closer there and that's where I think the good third baseman values are, but you can't do all that in 3 rounds. So it's a good way to see how everything matches up, and it helps you make decisions ahead of time. If I really, really want some of this tier of third baseman, maybe I jump them up around. Maybe I decide, well, I'm not going to get one of those. I need to back it off and get somebody from the next tier down, things like that. So it helps you to sort of see it all side by side and figure out how you're going to map out the positions against each other.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that a lot of us end up kind of doing the same kind of things without ever having talked about it, because I listening and reading to what you do, and I'm like, this is what I do too. I make a spreadsheet. I put all the positions on the top. I put all of my targets under the position, and then on the left, I have like the round range or the numbers, like picks 50 through 60 or whatever. And then I put like where I need to take each group of guys at the different positions. And then I go back and I look at kind of like overall, like, okay, where do I need to be taking third base? Is this the pocket where I want to be taking first baseman or starting pitching? I really like here. And it really kind of helps you see the whole picture when you do it that way. And for those of you who don't know about SGP, go back and listen to Jenny on SP Streamer, where she breaks down how she uses that. We won't go through that again.
The process is really good.
The book by
for that.
Jeff Zimmerman and Tanner Bell, very good material for that. But if you kind of just want to know a little bit more about it and why Jenny uses it, you can look into that. But I also go ahead, Justin.
Just a really good question from the chat. Is it possible there's an over-reliance on NFBC data, perhaps a logical fallacy created assuming fantasy players with money are better, but maybe they fall into a group think mentality?
I think that there can be, but it's also, when you're using ADP, I use it as sort of a predictor for the going rate of a player. So like if I want this guy, this is where I need to go to get him. So, it's not necessarily that I think, the guys that are high in ADP, I think are good, and the guys that are low are bad, but it's more like, where are the guys I'm targeting and what is the cost of those guys? And that's, a lot of times, the NFBC data that, ADP that you have going into the main event doesn't really always even work in the main event because everybody gets jumped up. So I'll often use that ADP, but in my mind know that I might have to go even a little bit earlier for the guys that I want personally. And I tend to find, everybody's got their guys that they like, and it's not all the same. So, it all kind of works out in the end.
I think it's a way to value them, to value the market, like how the market values players. And like you said, like, where do I need to take the guys that I want to build my team around, knowing how other people value them. I do believe, though, and it doesn't mean that everybody who plays for money is necessarily better than there's certainly people who play for free who are better than some people who play for money. But I do believe that overall, the people playing high stakes are better players than other people and who don't play for higher stakes. And I know Justin might disagree with that, but I've seen so many examples of people being able to adapt better and be able to value better and make better teams and stay competitive. It doesn't mean everybody in your league will, but when you've got a lot of money on the line, you're generally only going to be able to sustain that type of approach, unless you're Mike the Mouth for so long. Like if you're not doing well, you're not going to be able to keep funneling money over and over into this. So
I think, one, in terms of ADP, because I think this has two different parts. Something I remind people of on a regular basis is that there's many league winners that are factored into the NFBC as 15th place finishes. So like Jenny said, like it's a tool that you use to kind of figure out what the group think is. And then from there, you kind of take what you need from it and leave the rest. I don't disagree with Dave in terms of I think there are on average better players on a place like NFBC as opposed to ESPN or Yahoo or Fantrax. But that's because I think a lot of the sites that offer free leagues um, have more casual players on average, right? Because people are playing for free or playing for much lower stakes. It doesn't mean that there aren't great players who don't play on NFBC. There are some fantastic players in the industry, outside of the industry, that don't play on NFBC either because they can't or they don't want to. They don't have the funds to. But I think on average, you see more competitive people in a place like NFBC as opposed to those places because there is money involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times the money put into it sort of just causes you to be spending more time, and more time in fantasy baseball tends to generate better results. So if you have a big investment in it, you're more likely to put in the work.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that's a great question from Paulie. I appreciate asking because I think I don't think it's a disrespect thing either in terms of like even people who play on NFBC. I mean, I think there's this idea that it's an elitist group. I don't think it's that at all. But these people are putting a lot of time and effort because there's a lot of money involved in the process. So
for some of us, it's a decent amount of our income. I mean, it kind of depends on what your job is at work. I mean, Jenny is someone who doesn't need this income, but there are people who kind of depend on it. So Jenny, you also brought up on SP Streamer, you were talking about Steamer 600 projections, which kind of puts everybody on the same level because it assumes everybody is getting 600 plate appearances. I thought this was brilliant because one thing I don't think people think enough about is that projection systems try to factor in playing time and injuries. And while they do a pretty good job on the whole, there are ways, there are edges. If you can find them, you can figure out teams' playing time tendencies. Some guys play 4 out of 5 games compared to some guys play 5 out of 5 games. And looking at their not just when you look at the Steamer 600, you're looking at just the skills projection, pretty much what they think will happen if they all get the same amount of plate appearances. So then you can apply your own playing time and injury assessment to it. I think that's pretty much where the biggest advantage lies over projections, is because we can say, okay, I don't think it's projecting this playing time as well. But people just look at projections and they're not looking at the plate appearances that go with those projections. I think you're like, oh, well, this guy's projected for 10 home runs, this guy's projected for 20. Yeah, but the guy with 20 is projected for like 250 more plate appearances. Okay, so it's not that he's going to hit home runs at 2 times the rate. It's that he's projected to get more at bats. So how do you use Steamer 600? Like, do you look at it as kind of like a way to measure a player's skill and then recalculate the projections based on what you're assuming the playing time and time missed due to injuries is?
Yeah, I use Steamer 600. When Steamer and Steamer 600 come out, those are where I'm putting in a lot of my time looking at them. But then I do actually the same thing with any projection system that I use. So when ATC or the BAT come out, which are usually the final ones that I use for like the main event, I will always regress them to a per plate appearance projection. So the way that my spreadsheet is set up is that I take ATC, in this case is the current spreadsheet I have, and I figure out home runs per plate appearance, runs, RBI, all the stats per plate appearance, and then I basically add the plate appearances back in so that when I go into my own spreadsheet, I can adjust the playing time that I think, and it will adjust the projection for you. So that's kind of nice to have. And the other thing that I added this year, I took all of the projection systems that I have access to that I've paid for or the free ones, and I put everybody's plate appearance projections side by side. So I just took the plate appearance projections, put them all side by side, and calculated like the standard deviation of all of the different projection systems. So I have my set plate appearances that are then calculated into the stats. And then next to that, I have the standard deviation of what all the projection systems were. So like if you know Byron Buxton, for instance, has a huge standard deviation in the plate appearances that he's projected for, and somebody like George Springer, and so like some of them are all over the place, because if you look at certain projection systems, they're projecting for full plate appearances for somebody who we know is injury prone, and others are being maybe more realistic, maybe more conservative, however you want to say it with that. So I just kind of wanted to put it out there so I can see where they all are in comparison to each other.
Yeah, that's really cool. Something I've never thought of. I mean, the standard deviation thing is really cool. I imagine it's probably the more volatile and more injury prone players that have the biggest standard deviation.
Yes.
Is that
and the rookies?
Yeah.
Like
right.
Wonder
right.
Frank, or not Wonder Frank. Oh, Bobby Witt has a huge one too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned that Rowdy Tellez was a guy who kind of popped when you were doing your Steamer 600 projection research, and he's interesting to me because he's a lefty, and often lefties get benched versus left-handed pitching, and he has so far in his career. But there isn't really a reason that I see for him to be sitting versus lefties. He's got a career 98 weighted runs created plus versus lefties compared to 102 weighted runs created plus versus righties. It's not a huge difference. Granted, there is more power there, and this is only over 242 plate appearances. But as of right now, I don't see a justifiable reason to sit him versus lefties at this point. So it's really easy to see him kind of eventually getting full-time at-bats, kind of like we saw Kike Hernandez when he went to Boston after years of being used in just short side platoons for most of his career. And he only has an 86 weighted runs created plus versus righty. So do you agree that we might see Rowdy on unleashed in 2022?
Yeah, when I was on turn 2, and we were doing over and undervalued players, and I was on the NL Central version of that, and that was my undervalued hitter. I think he can definitely get full-time plate appearances, and like that was something that came from looking at Steamer 600. If you just look at everybody side by side, you can see, well, geez, if this guy gets full-time plate appearances, he could do really well. And then that causes you to go look at the team situation and look at his lefty righty split situation and things like that, and that can really help some guys pop. Because if you think about it, like if we looked at what we thought, I should do this year, save the and I'm not trying to blame roster resource or anything, but you save the roster resource lineup projections from preseason and look at what it ends up being for later in the season. So many things happen. There's guys that we never even heard of that are going to be playing, and it helps to use something like that when like a guy gets hurt, and then all of a sudden there's this person replacing him. You don't really know anything about him. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience. Well, you can see through that what he might be able to do if all of a sudden he has playing time.
Yeah. What would you say is your biggest weakness as a fantasy player? Do you have like things that you're identifying? Like, for Dave, it's obviously he has to draft Cleveland players, right?
Fucking knew you were gonna say that.
No, I don't think I'm great at streaming pitchers, which I think is partly why I've gone pitcher heavy early in my drafts. I've been doing that
Makes
since
sense.
I started playing in the main event. I don't do a great job of it. I mean, you can look on paper and easily see who you think should be the best pitcher that week, and I just feel like, for me at least, it never works out that way. So I like to only be streaming like maybe one spot out of my 9. And so if you can, have a good 6 solid starters that you're starting more or less every week, 2 relievers, maybe 5 and 3, and then just have that one spot. That's like the most I really want to have, because I know I'm not that good at it. I'm pretty conscious of speed, so I often end up kind of light on home runs. I tend to not take the guys that the power no average guys, even though I did take Eugenio Suarez last year, but I end up not getting that many of those, and so I end up light on home runs. I end up with like the 25 to 30 home run guys instead of like the real big hitters. I also need to learn more about handedness and splits and trying to maybe predict platoons. I have a terrible, vice of not knowing what anybody's handedness is. I don't know anybody's hand. I have to look it up every stinking time.
I'm the same way.
Even on my own teams, I'm setting lineups every week, and I still have to look up what this guy's handedness is, and it drives me crazy because I can't remember it. I don't know what it is. It's like it flies right out of my brain. So I need to, be better about that, I think, and looking at matchups and handedness for matchups.
I've gotten better for pitchers. Like I know now in my head, I know what pitchers are left-handed, which pitchers are right. But for batters, I mess it up all the time. Paul's always correcting me on the podcast when I say someone's hitting from the right-hand side. No, left. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, one of the guys who I was looking into this year, who I think has a chance to bust because he's a left-handed hitter who's a good hitter, but he has not been as good against lefties, and I think that he could end up being platoon, and that's Jared Walsh, who's getting drafted, as a starter, but his career numbers, now granted, he did hit for a lot of power versus lefties, but he also hit like 150 or something, and like just in his career, even in the minors, he really never has hit lefties very well. And that's the first guy that the managers will look to platoon is a lefty against lefties. I definitely think he could end up sitting versus tough lefties, but it could be even worse than that, especially if he starts out struggling against them. You don't see like right-handed hitters getting sat versus right-handed pitchers, really, unless there's like a really good lefty on their bench to come in. But that's what I'm kind of looking for. I'm looking to avoid those landmines. And even though I like Jared Walsh, I don't think he's necessarily a bust, but I think he has a much higher bust risk than other guys because of that. I also thought it was interesting you're talking about streaming pitchers. One thing that our industry has kind of always accepted, it's like okay to stream pitching, but streaming hitters makes a lot more sense because you don't have the same downside. Like a bad pitcher stream can wreck your ratios. If you stream a hitter, okay, even if they go 0 for 20 or something on the week, your average isn't going to be tanked or anything. It doesn't have the same effect on your ratios like a bad streaming starter is. So I think it makes a lot of sense, especially if you've identified pitching evaluation as a weakness, to go pitching heavy and then look to stream hitters more, because you can take advantage of the schedule. Teams that have 7 games in a week or 4 games in a half week compared to other guys that have 3. There's ways to take advantage of that, especially in shallower leagues.
Yeah, I did a lot more streaming hitters this year. This is the first year that I really did it heavily, and I think it works out right. I mean, Darren Ruff was on and off my team like 20 times last year because, if you get the right matchups, and he can be very valuable.
Oh, yeah, really good against lefties.
Paulie from the chat is saying Welch's defense will keep him in the lineup. The DH spot is taken. I've actually dropped Walsh recently in my ranks because of exactly what Dave was talking about. This is something when I was taking a deeper look at him recently, I went, "Oh my god, he was atrocious against lefties." The only thing is the Angels don't have anybody else. So if we come out of the lockout and the Angels sign someone,
that argument.
I don't like it either, because people
look at that roster.
Come out of nowhere. I mean, Gavin Sheets came out of nowhere with Chicago. People are like, "Oh, there's no competition." Guys will come out; they will find people to put in, and we don't know who they're going to sign and all that stuff too. But
and that's if they sign someone coming out of the lockout, that's a sign that he's in some real trouble.
But he might not start out in trouble. But if he doesn't hit lefties early on, I think he could end up getting platooned. And I'm no expert on players' defense, but I'm looking on Fangraphs. He had a negative 10.8 defensively. Now, I'm not saying that that's the be-all end-all rating for defense, but
defensive metrics suck.
I understand that, but I find it very unlikely that a guy with a negative 10.8 defensive rating on Fangraphs is so good that they can't take his defense out of the fielding. So
I think there's a bigger issue with they really. I mean. If you look even in their upper minors, like there is nobody for them to platoon at first with, unless Ohtani is going to start.
Taylor Ward, can Taylor Ward play first base?
No,
really.
Stick Jackman. I mean, can anybody play first base?
Yeah, I think anybody.
Justin Upton over there.
Yeah, Upton. Exactly.
Jack Mayfield.
Yeah, I don't know about that. But they could sign I don't know who off the top of my head who's available or trade for someone, but just because we were talking about potential. Or the Milwaukee Brewers, like if they could find a Mike Brousseau type guy
Yeah.
You know, and Madden loves to platoon. So I mean, I think it's definitely in the cards that happens. I think that they need to add to that roster first, because the roster at present time does not have a platoon partner for Jared Walsh. So, what's your biggest strength? We talked about weakness. What's your biggest strength? What is something you do better than other people?
I think that one thing that I try to do more than a lot of people, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm female and I don't have this sort of male ego, that I tend to not assume that I know everything. I think I'm good at not assuming that I know everything. I think that one of the smartest ways to play this game is to not just form an opinion on a guy, stick to it, look at the stats that support your opinion. I love this guy, I hate this guy, and that's it.
Yep.
You know, everything is a probability. And that's one of the things that I like so
Yep.
much when I listen to somebody like Rob Silver, because almost all of his analysis starts out with, what are the odds that such and such happens versus what are the odds that this happens? You know, like, what are the odds that, you know, Wander Franco's back in the minors at some point this season? It's not a non-zero chance, you know, and if you love him, that's great. You can love him, but you need to also see the other side of your own argument. Like, you need to be able to be open-minded and not just have a single-minded opinion on somebody. You know, you need to realize when you're wrong, or think that, you know, this, even like if you're thinking about the group think might not be right on somebody. You know, just I try to see all sides of a situation and see all sides of an argument and try to think about, you know, what's most likely, but also what's less likely still might happen.
Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest things that can take your game to another level, is when you stop being stubborn. And like, people get so invested in guys. Like, if I'm wrong about someone, I move on instantly. And like, I only care about being right in the end. I don't care about being right all the time now, all that stuff. Like, I have zero ego when it comes to player evaluation. If someone says something that makes sense to me, if we're talking about a player back and forth here and you say something that makes sense, I will say, you know what, that makes sense. I'm going to change my thoughts on him immediately, and then flip the switch just like that. Some people have a really tough time letting go. They're stubborn. They don't want to be better. They want to be right.
Well, I don't necessarily know that I want to be right, but I think my biggest weakness is not moving on quick enough. And it's especially because I put so much time and effort into every individual player analysis. Like you were talking about earlier on, you don't dig into every single player anymore because you don't have time. I'm starting in September and August for the upcoming season, and I dig in deeply into every single player. And so by the time I've put 6 months in and we're at the draft table in Vegas, I'm very, very like tied to the guys I like and the guys I don't. And I need to get better about being able to cut bait when those guys that I was really tied to struggle too long. And it's something I'm getting better at. Actually, the 2020 season, I think, has helped me immensely because we couldn't wait. Yeah, you had to move on. And it's something I tried to kind of carry on into 2021. And I think I did okay with it. But it's something I still need to continue to get better, because I've always in my back of my head, like, no, you know this, you know that this guy's going to do this or do that. And we don't know.
I tend to, I don't do as much player evaluation in the first place. I tend not to have a strong opinion about a guy in the first place. So I look at players, as what stats they can provide in certain situations. There's a guy that might be totally wrong for one team build and totally right for another. And I don't have an opinion of, if he's right for it, I'll take him. If he's at a good price, I'll take him. I'm not concerned about what I thought going in. I just am sort of open to almost everyone. There's very few players that I will, entirely cross off the list. And that's almost always because of injury.
And I think the other good thing that you were talking about was range of outcomes. This is like, some people are so married to projections. The thing is, like, if you're looking at a projection of, say, Jacob deGrom, or someone who, like, I'm reading the forecaster, for example, and they kind of just give you something in the middle, when really it could be one of two things. Either he could pitch like 5 innings, or he could pitch 150 innings, but they kind of go in between. They say they'll like project them for like 110 or something like that. It's very important to know what the range of outcomes is, because if one possibility is that they could not play at all, and you're talking about Wander Franco, Bobby Witt, minor league players, a lot of people only look at the upside and they're like, yeah, but they could do, but if their downside is getting sent down to the minors, or if they're really injury prone, missing all of the season, that's something that people don't take into account enough. Like, they're only looking at the projections. They're only looking at the average. They're not looking at the ceiling and the floor, which I always am looking at. Everything is a range. You're not going to see Francisco Lindor isn't going to get sent down, to the minors. Wander Franco could. That's just the fact of it. And you have to be aware of those things to know and to factor in that risk and say, okay, I don't want to have a bunch of guys like this because I might have to replace him. I don't want to have to replace 4 other guys too. Because I always see people say, I'm going to take this guy, and then when he gets injured, I replace him with this guy. You can't do that, because unless that's the only injury you're replacing the entire freaking year, you can't say that guy that you're replacing him with is his replacement. He's replacing that guy, and he's replacing 4 other guys that you lost too. So you can't say, I'm going to draft Buxton, and then when he gets hurt, I'm going to replace him with Akil Baddoo last year and whatever, because Akil Baddoo is probably replacing other guys that you lost too. So you have to look at all of these things.
Yeah, somebody like a Max Muncy is somebody that, like, there's, like I said, so few players that I cross off entirely, but like Muncy is an example of one of them, because I'm just not even taking the chance that he's going to have Tommy John.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
And I love Max Muncy. I'm a big Muncy.
Me too. Guy. I know.
That shouldn't matter, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you like the guy or not.
When we did those drafts in Arizona, right? His injury hadn't happened yet.
It happened.
Right.
And a lot of the people in that draft and hold league were using my ranks because I was the only person who had released ranks. And someone turned to me and went, "You have Max Muncy as the 4th first baseman." And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I really like Max Muncy." And then, like 2 days later, he injured the elbow, and so like I was really, really high on him. So for me to completely take him off my board, says exactly what I mean.
People are still taking him in DCs right now. Like
his ADP in ESPN leagues, because I just did an article that was released earlier today comparing ADP, using NFBC ADP to compare it to the ADPs of other sites. His ADP in ESPN is like 46 or something.
Wow.
Well, you have to be paying attention to know that you have to be seeing the depths of the news to see that little quote. It's just that one little quote about his UCL. Because for the most part they were saying he's fine. You just see that one quote of, "Oh, it's not healing so well," and "Oh yeah, I did tear my UCL." And if you miss that one quote, you're not seeing any of that.
See, for me, it's years of skepticism, because I've seen so many times where they go, oh, the best is when they say structurally everything's fine, and then people are like, "Oh, see, he's fine," and I'm like, no. That is not what that means. There could definitely still be something underlying here, as there very often is. And so for me, I just ignore when they say things like that, and I always assume that there's something more that they're not telling, and which was the case with Muncy, especially if you're seeing it in their performance and you're like, okay, he's clearly not himself right now.
Well, UCL's healed themselves, I thought.
Oh yeah, well, according to Sandy Alderson, they do, but I'm not buying what he's selling.
That's the best.
Any lessons that you're taking from 2021 and incorporating in your 2022 prep?
Yeah, I think that one of the ones that I learned, I think, was not to rely too much on the argument of, yeah, but how many innings is this guy going to pitch? We did a lot of that last year, and I think maybe it was 2020 that threw everybody off. Everybody said, they're not going to go from a low number in 2020 up to a high number, and that ended up being wrong in a lot of cases. I avoided some guys that I shouldn't have. I also learned from working with Rob in the tag team league that I would like to have, sort of a group of people that I can bounce ideas off of. I don't really have that before this. And Rob was like a good source of, just somebody to talk to before Fab and things on Sundays. And I've heard other people say that they have that, like I know, Dave, you have that. And I think that like trying to cultivate some sort of group that I can talk to would be a really valuable thing to do. The other thing is I have no idea how to fix it, but in 2020 and 21, I lost points in the standings, significant points in the standings and 2020 was like the last 2 weeks. And then this year it was like the last month. And I don't know I have to figure out what I was doing wrong, but maybe it's nothing. Maybe it was just bad luck. I don't know. But both years lost significant points in the standings in the end, and I don't know how to fix that, but I got to figure out a way to fix that because it's so frustrating. This in 2021, I led my main event from I think the middle of May, and then lost it in I lost the lead on like September something.
Yeah.
And almost finished third. I was lucky to get second on like the last day of the season.
And you saved your money. Like, it's not like you ran out of fab. You did spend a lot of it on Eloy because you needed what he was providing.
Maybe that's the problem. That might have been the problem.
I'm not judging you because I'm the last. I have a problem. Like, I have a lot of difficulty. This is the whole reason I brought Tony in initially, was like, don't let me spend all my money before September because then I'm out of money, and that's when I lose. Like, I've got a lead going in, and then I lose it. You have to have enough money left. And I think I was telling you, don't go. I know what you were doing. You were going like $1 more than the next guy below you in money had to bid on Eloy.
That was a mistake.
Yeah, I was telling you to go lower than that because I was like, I don't think they're going to go all in on Eloy. And even if they do, I'm not sure that he's worth it because I think that was going to leave you with like $20 or something like that. Was that about
I
right?
had like 70 for the end of the season, but that was for like 6-7 weeks. That was
it wasn't like just a month. It was almost 2 months. I feel like
I still had enough money to get guys. I just wasn't getting the top guy on my list like ever.
Right.
Which I think may have made a difference.
Yeah. So I think, and something that I need to improve on too, is just saving a little bit more for the end. There's certain periods that you want more money to spend more money on. The beginning of the season, right around the All-Star break the trade deadline where guys are getting moved, you want to speculate on some guys and whatnot. And then September with all the call-ups and all of the teams that are playoff push and other teams that are kind of they're kind of resting their guys. Like, that's where there's so many changes happening in September. It's like its own game. You want to make sure you do save some bullets for that time of the year.
Yeah, for sure.
So, we talked about a little bit earlier how you've become much more active recently in the industry. You've been on a lot of podcasts this off season. You wrote the roster construction article for FTN's Draft Guide. You recently started writing for Fantrax. Is that right? Did you actually, you did?
I haven't written anything yet. I'm working on, I signed on essentially with Rotoballer and Fantrax at the same time. Okay. And right now I'm writing my first article for Rotoballer, and then I'm going to follow that up with something for Fantrax.
Okay.
But they're not out yet.
And is this, is that kind of where you want to be? Like, do you want to just writing articles for them, or is there ultimately something else that you're looking forward to in the future?
No, I think this is it. I don't want to. The thing I'm concerned about is overcommitting myself, because I want to be a player first. Like, I don't necessarily I'm not looking to be I'm not looking to like make money off of this. Essentially, I mean, obviously that's nice, but and so I always want it to be, fantasy baseball is like my side hustle. I want that to be like a side hustle to my side hustle, that sort of thing. Yeah. So I may have honestly overcommitted myself to Fantrax and Best Ball and Rotoballer, but what I did with both of them is I told them that I'm not going to commit to something on a regular schedule. I'm not going to like commit to putting out a weekly article or something like that, partly because my job is unpredictable. Yeah. And so I can't, there's this past week, I was planning on getting the Rotoballer thing done last week. I spent the last week working like crazy. So I am like a week late already than what I told them I was going to be. So I'm glad that I put it out there at a time that might happen because it immediately happened. So yeah, I just kind of want it to be a side thing, and I'm not going to force it. Really, I don't want to force it. Like, if I have something to say, I'll say it. I don't want to just be like churning out stuff just to do stuff.
You don't want to be the Justin Mason of the fantasy industry.
That is all quality content.
Damn right.
What was that article? Like, oh God, what was the ridiculous one where it was just like the most simplistic article ever?
He's like, what?
I don't know what you're
I
talking
know there's
about.
so many of them you can't choose, but no, it was God. There was one where it was like,
I don't know.
oh, shit, I have to look it up later. It was one that you were laughing about. You were like, "Hey, can I do this?" And they let you do it. I don't know. All right. Anyways, all right. So Jenny.
I tried to get maybe this what I tried to get Fangraphs one year on April Fool's Day to let me write a bunch of one-word articles. So the article title would be something along the likes of will Mike Trout be a bust? And the entire article would be no, something like that. They did not go for this.
With hard-hitting analysis like this, it's hard to believe this takes you. Okay, anyway.
That's hilarious.
I love you. So, Jenny, obviously, as men, we can never fully understand what it's like to be one of so very few women in the industry. How would you describe being in such a minority? Is it fun and exciting being one of, in that minority to play fantasy baseball at the highest level? Is it intimidating? Is it frustrating at times?
A little bit of all of that, I think. I mean, there's been some great women to be, join, and Shelly's been around for a while. There's been some other great women around for a while, and then we're getting some more. Like Lauren Auerbach is great.
Mhm.
You get some like good people coming in. There still haven't been a lot in high stakes NFBC and in the main event and things like that. There's a woman's name that has been in the main event for a couple years now. There's a Marianne Longrio.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea who she is. She's always online. I assume it's a woman. I know when I used to play poker online, though, there were men who used women's names as their screen name. So who knows? I would love to know anything about her. But so essentially, I'm the only woman in the room in Vegas, things like that.
Right.
There's a few. There was a woman in the auction with me last year, but I don't know. I tend to sort of have male-dominated hobbies, so I tend to kind of. I would rather just sort of be like one of the guys. I would rather just sort of be there the same as everybody else and have it not really be noticed. I never know if like the conversation that's happening around me would be different if I wasn't there. I suspect that it probably would. But I never know whether that causes some sort of like resentment that like people feel like they have to, watch what they say around me or anything like that, which by the way, you don't ever have to do that.
No, definitely not.
But
I'm
also,
no,
don't. I'm also like, Dave knows, I have kind of a ball busting sense of humor. And
oh yeah, the first time you met me, you were immediately making fun of me.
It's just like in my nature. That's how my whole family is. My friend, like that's just how I communicate with people,
Absolutely.
and it's not always received very well. So sometimes it's misunderstood. There was a guy that I worked with many years ago who played college football, and I made some sort of offhanded joke about how he was not currently an NFL player, and he got so offended. So offended. He never talked to me again after that. Like that was it. That was the end of our friendship.
Wow.
And it was just like because you're 30 years old and I pointed out that you're not an NFL player. That's it. Like I don't know. I think sometimes I just need to be a little bit careful with that. But
that's more on him, I think.
Yeah.
That's his own insecurity.
For the most part, everybody's been really nice and very welcoming. Yeah. And, like I said, in the first year I was in the main event room, it was a little intimidating, but I think some of that's, they weren't they weren't being intimidating to me. I was intimidated, and
sure.
Now that I'm older and more experienced and whatever, and, I've noticed in the last, few years since I turned 40, I just give less and less of a fuck of what anybody thinks. So, it's just easier to just sort of be there and do my own thing and not care about it. It has helped though, I think, to be out there a little bit more in the industry because I'm not just like a random woman in the room. People, sort of know who I am. It's partly why I put my actual face on my Twitter avatar, just because people can, maybe recognize me and not wonder who I am, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, and you do like you fit in very naturally with the guys. I mean, like when we met you in Vegas, it was like you were part of our group. It was just like ball busting humor and all that stuff. Uh-oh, the Bengal cat is back. He has made his return.
I will say you mentioned Marianne Longora, I think is her name. She was at the Vegas main event last.
No way. Really? Oh.
Yeah, she did 2 Vegas main events.
She did the main one, like the one at 11 or whatever, like the one that everybody's in.
Oh, yeah. I did not see her. I need to introduce myself.
I don't really. Yeah, I unfortunately last year it was kind of different because we were kind of in and out of there real quick. Like usually we stand around, we talk about our teams and all that, but with COVID, it was kind of like things just kind of kept moving real quick. So I didn't really see her, but she could have been there, and I just didn't notice. There's a lot of people there, and last year I actually had people who I had never talked to before who listened to me on pods and whatever, and came up and talked to me. So I made a lot of new acquaintances. I didn't really have a lot of time to go outside of that and look. And if she was there, maybe she kind of drafted and then left. I don't know, but I always thought that you were the only girl there live. But
I think the first time I saw her name pop up was in 2019.
I don't even recognize the name, to be honest.
Yeah, I've been in a couple leagues with her actually.
Oh wow, okay.
She was in.
Yeah, I would love to know what her story is.
Yeah. But I also loved when we were talking, and you said when your husband is at events with you, people assume that he's the player and you're just kind of there with him, which is funny because you're and then you're like, no, he kind of just gets in the way. You don't really know what he's talking about.
It's funny because I found myself doing the same thing. I saw a couple walking into the main event last year, and I immediately thought to myself that she must be somebody's wife and she's going to leave. Turns out I was right in that particular instance. She did leave, but I thought to myself, you know what I just did? I just did the same damn thing that people do to me. Why did I do that? And so I think that if both of us were sitting at a table, maybe by now some of the draft moderators know me, but at a certain time they may have come as they're moving along the table, may have asked him for his pick instead of me, and I just don't I don't want that. Plus, yeah, like I said, he's just a distraction. All he will tell me is to draft Shohei Ohtani or Pete Alonso. That's all he wants.
This sounds like fucking Tony when he just tells me to draft Byron Buxton in every pick. Yeah, not helpful. So does that kind of when people like, do you kind of have that chip on your shoulder? Does that give you a little added motivation? Like, oh, they don't think that I'm the player, or because you're not really you're not super emotional about this. I know. I feel like you're pretty logical with this stuff. Like,
no, I mean, I want to do well. Yeah. The only thing I worry a little bit about, especially now that I put myself out there a little bit, I worry about, if I have a bad year, how's that going to look? That sort of thing. But I'm in it for, not only just the winning, but I'm in it to make money. So that's a lot of why I want to win. But yeah, like I've had concerns that like, if I have a bad year, it's going to be, especially because NFBC, it puts everything out there in the public. It's going to be
right.
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
No, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. But I mean, I think you've had, multiple years of sustained success, and it's not like getting first isn't what it's all about. I mean, obviously as a player, you want that first place designation, but it's consistently placing and consistently being in that top, 5 range in all of your, not all of your leagues, but the vast majority of your leagues. That's what I look for when I'm looking for guys or looking for players who are not, who I don't want to go up against, because if you can consistently do well, sometimes it's just a little bit of luck that pushes you over to the top to get that first place. Like, you're talking about you lose it in the last couple of weeks or whatever. That doesn't mean that you're a vastly inferior player than you were when you were winning the league, So it's really that consistency. So I think that you have that. You've since like 2018. I know you had a bad 2019, but I think since then you've solidified yourself as a legitimate, like, good fantasy high stakes player. And keep in mind too, that's this level. Like, this is the highest level, and in most leagues you're probably dominating.
Yeah. Although my home league, I don't put as much effort in as I probably should. Finished third this year, but that happens.
But that's because you didn't decide to, not because you couldn't. Right. I mean, you've got a demanding job on top of all of this too. I think you're going to end up being a huge inspiration to women in the industry. I think we're going to have more. I think with all of the conversations going on, we're going to have more women who join not only the industry in general, but the high stakes realm as well. And I think that you're going to be kind of like that woman that is really pushing it forward. have you ever thought about like what you can do to further their advancement in the advancement of other women in the industry?
It's a topic that I've been asked before. I don't know quite what to say because, there's one thing just sort of playing fantasy baseball, and then there's like doing it at the high stakes level. And those are two very different things. And the amount of time that you have to invest into playing at that high level is going to be hard for people. Like, I don't have kids and I'm not going to have kids. And so that is, any woman, and I'd be curious to know how Danielle did when in her first, foray into this last year. But like, even if I know some guys in the that play are stay-at-home dads and do a lot of the work and do a lot of the chores and all that. But I feel like we all know that like when it comes down to it, when shit really hits the fan, mom's the one taking care of it. So I think that if you have kids, it can be real hard to invest the kind of time that you need. And you have to have women who really want to do this. So you can't just like throw them into leagues. Like, you can sponsor people into all the leagues you want, but if they're not fully in.
May have lost her for a second there. So I'll talk about this real quick and hopefully we'll get Jenny back here in a second. I think
she just said she has to get her laptop charged.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll vamp for a sec. I think it's a really good point because like Danielle, like she would, I think, be really, really good at fantasy baseball. If she could invest, if she could invest the kind of time. Now she also doesn't have the desire to invest that kind of time, but the only reason I get to do as much stuff as I would like to do is because
you have her.
Yeah, it's because I've got her to kind of pick up the slack. And so I think that there is a good, or something that we can do is get women more involved just in regular social fantasy baseball, because I think with that, then more women will graduate into the high stakes world at some point. So hopefully we'll get Jenny back here in a second. I'm guessing her laptop probably
died.
Yeah. So
probably be a couple minutes to boot back up and get back on. But no, I mean, it's obviously I hope it wasn't unfair of me to ask. I was kind of just looking for her thoughts on it in general, because obviously it shouldn't be on Jenny. Like, she just wants to play, and that's fine. It's not like she has to be anything more than what she is. But I do think that there will be women who look up to her in this industry at some point. Welcome back, Jenny.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries. It's all good.
We got you back just in time to ask you, I think, the most important question of the entire episode. And that question is, are you Dr. Dave?
No, I didn't know that we didn't know who Dr. Dave is.
We do not know.
Oh, that's so interesting. No, I wish I was.
I'm assuming Dave is now adding this to the rundown every week until we find out who it is, because this was part of the rundown with John Fish last week.
Yeah, well, you loved it too. You got so excited for it, so I figured I'd leave it in.
It's my favorite thing.
I know it is. Anything that makes fun of me, and this is something you both have in common, but anything that makes fun of me is your favorite thing. I'm really curious to see when we have Pete on, because I think he's the first person that we could be asking who could legitimately be Dr. Dave.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a draft cheat.
Yes.
All right.
I do not have the bandwidth to pretend to be Dave.
I know. I know. It's not you. I know it's not Fish. I know who it's not. I don't know who it is.
I didn't know that we didn't know who it is. That's hilarious.
Yeah. Still don't know.
I kind of assumed it was Zach.
Well,
I think that is a major assumption.
A lot of people are assuming that, but he has gone out of his way to message me and text me, or not text me, but message me, DM me on Twitter and be like, "Hey, I know that it sounds like something I would do, but I promise it's not me." So
that's exactly what
he would do.
You would do to throw you off the fence.
I don't know. I feel like I can read people pretty well. I don't think it's him. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's hilarious.
It is pretty funny. All right, so you ready for a little in or out?
I am.
All right, let's do it.
However,
Justin?
I've warned you that I'm mostly not in or out on people, so we'll see.
That's true. That's true. Well, you can kind of look at it as in or out at their ADP. Like, is this someone that you can look at it as a target or not?
I am taking notes.
Justin just got his notepad out.
All I have to do is just look at your rankings.
Yeah, I know. My everybody knows whether.
But he's full of shit because he doesn't draft according to his rankings, anyways. He ranks Jacob deGrom 4th, and then he struggles.
No, he was 6th, and I took him at the beginning of the 3rd round.
You bumped him down.
Yeah, I previously bumped him down. See, here's the thing: if you want my updated ranks, you have to subscribe to my Patreon. Otherwise,
what the hell do I want those for?
Then you won't know.
That's where you get the good stuff.
All right. Take it away.
All right. Byron Buxton, ADP of 52. Dave, I already know you're out. So, Jenny, are you in or out at the ADP currently of Byron Buxton?
I am probably out. It's more of a roster. So, I was about to say it's a roster construction thing and about how much risk you've taken up to that point and then how much risk you would then take after that point. But with him, he's going at such a high ADP. So one of the things that I actually wrote in my notes, but I didn't say earlier, was one of the things that I've been trying to incorporate this year is to really think about, in terms of risk, especially injury risk, where I'm taking them versus, like, I don't want to take guys that I won't feel like I can drop. So I want to I'm fine with taking an injured guy if I'm going to be willing to drop them. And I don't think you can drop Buxton is a problem. So I want to keep as many bench spots flexible as possible. So if he's out, he gets dropped.
Guys going to the COVID IL, like there's so many guys, you don't want to go into the season with so many injury risks on your team already.
Yeah, I have drafted him once this year in a best ball league. So
I think
how that works.
That's the place for him, though, because you've got a large roster. You don't have to take the bad or the missing. So I think that's that's a good spot for him. I feel kind of the same.
I'm not out on him. I just think 4th round is too high. I just think it's not taking his risk into account enough.
He missed almost 100 games last year, and there is no discount.
No, I mean, if he was in the 6th round, I would say sure. Assuming I hadn't taken any risks at that point, I'd be like, yeah, I think that's a good place to take him. In Yahoo leagues where you have an IL slot, that's another place I could see taking him because the replacement value is so high in those leagues. You only start 3 outfielders, so shit, yeah.
Well, a lot of Fantrax leagues have IL too.
What was that?
I said a lot of Fantrax leagues have IL also.
Oh, he's not the money leagues, anyways.
Okay, yeah, my home leagues are there, and Glarf was there, and that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah,
he's also not the 30 home or 30 stolen base, upside anymore. Like he's just not running that way, and so like honestly, I'd rather if I'm going to take a gamble at that spot, I'm going to take it on Mondesi as opposed to on Buxton, because I think Mondesi has like league-changing, league-winning potential, whereas I don't necessarily know that Buxton does because he's not running quite as much as he used to.
Buxton's a really good hitter.
Kind of the same.
It's fair.
I don't know. Yeah.
Next.
I had him last year in a best ball, and he did really well.
Yeah.
Mondesi or Buxton?
No, Buxton.
Buxton. Okay, gotcha.
Wander Franco is going around pick 63. I am personally out. Dave, are you out?
I'm not out, but again, it's too high for what, like, it's so much projection, and people are using Vlad as their template and saying, well, look at how much he busted out and all this stuff. Like, I have no doubt that at some point Wander Franco will be really, really good, possibly even a 1st round pick good. I don't think it'll be this year, but even if it is, it's range of outcomes, right? Like you were saying, Rob Silver said he could get sent down to the minors. That's a similar thing that I thought. I don't think he will. It's also the Rays. It's a bad park. They could sit him sometimes. I don't know what I'm getting. Like, power and speed are the most bankable assets, but he doesn't give you really a ton of either of those unless he develops significantly from his first year, which he will, but I don't know that it happens all at once next year right away. So there's so many shortstop options. I just I can't bring myself to take him.
Jenny?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. he's not great at any one thing other than maybe average. And as you know, in a sophomore season, average can be a little bit tricky. The guys you can get figured out a little bit and then you adjust. But in the meantime of that happening, you can suffer a little bit, So what if he's hitting 265, 270? What if he's not doing bad enough to lose playing time, but not good enough to really be that one average boost in your lineup? And so, power and speed are moderate. It's just sort of, it's fine. But it's a pretty high price for somebody who's going to be fine with a good average potentially.
I like how whenever we have an upside argument on people, that people are just going to prorate like what the small sample was, but none of the Wander Franco people are doing that this year, because if they did that, you'd be saying, "Oh, look, 14 home runs and 4 stolen bases."
Right.
I
only when it fits the narrative.
Yeah. It's people just love to kind of pick and choose, and I'm not saying we should do that. I'm just personally, I don't think there's enough power or enough speed yet. Like Dave said, I think he could develop both over time. Though actually, I question how much he's ever going to really steal, because he's never really been a big stolen base guy in the minor leagues either. So, and where it's much easier to steal bases. So, I think at his peak, he's likely like peak DJ LeMahieu, which was like a high second round pick, which is great, right? Can win you a batting title, is going to get a crap ton of plate appearances, and that'll bring your whole team average up. But to me, I'm not going to pay the price where he's going right now. Next guy is Jazz Chisholm, a guy I will pay the price on and have in our Battle of the Podcast league. Jenny, are you in at Jazz Chisholm around pick 71?
He's definitely a roster construction guy. It depends a lot on what I've done up to that point. I'm not totally opposed to it. I would probably like to not have to do it if I could help it, because I'm worried about the average. Obviously he's got 2020 potential, and that's great. But he's not exactly a sophomore, but he's got a little, I believe, isn't it this is like his second real full season playing?
Yeah.
So
he only
there
had
could be some
plate appearances in 2020.
Yeah. So, it's a good shot to take if that's what you need at that point. I just kind of hope that I've built that I don't need that.
Dave?
He's a tough one because, he obviously the average projections are not good for him, anywhere in the 230s to 240 range. But looking at the underlying stats, it's not that bad. I mean, like the K rate isn't at 30% or anything. It's 28.5% last year. The thing is, like, he was actually better last year than he was for a lot of the minors. So I don't know if he's just like growing or if I should expect more regression in that standpoint. But the contact rate isn't in the danger zone. He's like 73% with 82% zone contact. Those aren't great, but for how hard he hits the ball, 112 max EV, 42% hard hit rate. He barrels 8.5%. I think there's a solid foundation here. And I think if you need steals, and he gives you power, I think he's like Jake he's on his do not draft list. I don't feel the same way. He also he had 4 different injuries last year between his hamstring, his ankle twice, and his shoulder. So there's only one of those, the hamstring, that ended up keeping him out like 3 weeks. The other ones were like 12 days at most, but he's a super aggressive player. He's kind of like Tatis, and I feel like that could lead him to getting injured more in the future as well, because he's just going all out, kind of like a Grady Sizemore did back in his prime.
Yeah, I think injuries are the only real concern I have with him. I think talent-wise, on a per plate appearance basis, he's actually going to be really good, and I think there is room for growth in the batting average department. But like you said, he got injured quite a bit last year, and so that has me a little bit hesitant. So he isn't necessarily a guy I'm targeting, but someone that I'm happy to take. He fell to pick 90.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got him at a phenomenal place. I was like, Jake, can we take him? He's like, no. God damn it.
At 90, I'll take a potential 25 guy just about every time. So
for sure, no question with that.
Jack Flaherty, another guy who is really, really good on a per inning basis as opposed to per plate appearance basis. The problem is injuries have really kind of taken a toll on his upside. Dave, are you in on Jack Flaherty going around pick 79?
No, I just don't know what I'm getting from him right now, and maybe there's the possibility that maybe he's just fine, but I mean he still had shoulder concerns, in late September of last year too. He feels like damaged goods right now, and there's other safer guys that I can take in that range that I'm just he's off my board.
What about you, Jenny? Jack Flaherty, a guy you'd be interested in?
I'm open to it, but I don't love it. So most of his injury last year was an oblique. The shoulder came later, and it was a sore shoulder. Like, everybody's very freaked out by how he was when he got back. And I just don't know quite what to make of it. It could mean nothing, it could just mean they just decided to sort of slow play him. And the only thing that makes me sort of not love that narrative is that they were in the playoff race. So, if they were a team that was out of it, it would have made a lot more sense.
Right.
So I don't love that part, but it's possible that he's healthy coming back in. I just sort of don't know what to think about him. So, maybe if he falls and he's like my SP3, I've got two good ones and he's my SP3, maybe. But he was so good before that oblique injury last year that I think he's got it in him. So it's possible I could get sucked in at the right price.
Yeah, he's going around like just outside the top 20 in terms of starters. I have him inside of my top 20 in my ranks. I think I need to drop him. Just because I don't know how comfortable I would be with him as my SP2. Maybe if I was getting real aggressive in a draft, and the only place I've drafted him this year was in a league where he's my SP3. But I don't think I can reasonably have him as a top 25 guy, considering his injury risk. And like, when push comes to shove and I'm in one of those $1,700 leagues, for the main event or, for the auction, I don't know that I can pull the trigger on a guy like that early. So I think I'm in because I've already drafted him, but I think I definitely need to drop him in my ranks.
He's also going at the same time as Cease and Berrios, and he's going before Trevor Rogers, and there's no way I can take him over those guys.
Mm-hmm. And I have him ranked above those guys, and I need to change that.
Okay.
So, the next guy on the list is Giovanni Gallegos, who I've argued about with Paul quite a bit so far this season. But Jenny, are you interested in Gallegos going around pick 82?
Probably not. So this was another guy. This was my overrated hitter or overrated pitcher on the Turn 2 pod for the NL Central. I just think that it's presumptuous to say that we know he's the closer. It's possible that he is. I mean, I think there's, maybe 60, 70% chance maybe that he is. But it's the argument that I don't like that it gets used in the industry is he's so good, he's going to be the closer.
Yep.
That's not how it works.
We've been making that argument for the last few years with him.
Yep.
Yeah. Who else are they going to use? He's going to be the closer because he's so good. Everybody's assuming that, Hicks and Reyes will be going to the rotation. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll, pick up somebody as a free agent. Those guys are right back in the bullpen, and then who knows what.
Yeah, I don't see those guys moving to the rotation. I don't care what they say.
I think he's great, but I'm not going to draft him as a guy that I feel confident in as being the closer. Not yet. I mean, maybe we'll get more clarity, if we get spring training, but not yet.
Yeah. I'm assuming you feel the same way, Dave.
Yeah, you'll get no such Paul Sporer argument from me that, I'm not going to argue with you just to argue because, I'm not in on this. And I'm looking at the first pitch Arizona where it calculates the difference between ADP and where you took him. And Paul is like negative 39. So you took him 39 places ahead of his ADP. Yeah, I think the biggest mistake people make in their closer evaluations and the reason that people think it's such a tough thing to they think it's such a crapshoot is because there's only X number of guys, and it's like 8 who we know for sure these are closers. Everybody else, we can think, okay, there's reasons to think yes, and there's also reasons to think no. And he's the first or second, depending on how you feel about Romano, who's in that category of we don't know. There's a lot of assumptions being made, and that's not how I play. And he's going way too early. If I'm going to make an assumption, it's going to be much later. I will say, I think in the Battle of the Pods draft, I think Toby got him as his closer too because he fell a bit. I don't mind that as much. It was in a DC, so he can still throw him in there for good ratios, even if he doesn't end up closer, and he's not dependent on him because he has Edwin Diaz as well. So in that situation, I don't think it's horrible if he falls a bit, but for where he goes, he's a big avoid for me.
Derek Gould, who works for the Post Dispatch in St. Louis, said that he expects Gallegos to at least start sharing the role with someone else. But he also said that someone else is likely not on the team yet. So to me, it's like, if the best case scenario is that he's sharing the role, I don't even want him as my closer too. Like he's not off of my board necessarily, especially because you can't, like in a DC, I'm fine like drafting Finnegan and Rainey and going, okay, I'm pretty sure I got the closer between these two guys, right? You can't do that if he's not on, we don't know who this person who's not on the team is yet. And so I'm just avoiding Gallegos. Again, another guy I probably need to drop in my ranks because when he said that, I was like, "Ooh, that doesn't sound good at all."
I will say that I don't trust beat writers at all because they were horrendously inaccurate for years now. But you can't unhear that. So, and it was kind of confirming what I already thought. Anyways, it was like, I never felt like
it's not
was the guy.
It's not so much that I trust beat writers in terms of evaluating who's going to end up with a job or who's not, but I do trust beat writers in terms of they know who these teams are interested in signing and not.
That's true. Yeah.
And so when we're talking about like guessing about where free agents may sign or where trades may happen, they're right more often than they're not. So, next guy is Bobby Witt Jr. going around pick 90. I'm going to throw in Corey Seager going around the same spot. Jenny, are either of these two guys you're interested in?
I'm not interested in Bobby Witt. Out of all the guys on our list today, that is the big NO for me out of this whole list. I don't draft rookies that haven't played in the majors yet. I don't trust that we know when they're going to come up. I'm not willing to use a bench spot on them. I get the appeal maybe in a DC or something like that, but in a main event, I'm just a big fat no. Corey Seager, I like in theory. He's got good, good average, but he doesn't really provide steals, and his power is good, but not like over the top. So it's very much a roster construction thing again with him. Like if I maybe drafted Jose Ramirez in the first round, I don't necessarily need to get my steals from shortstop at that point. So he plays more like his stats are more like a third baseman. So you can kind of in your mind switch up those two. So like if I have the steals already and I don't need them, and I have missed out on shortstops, that might be a good option there. But I also sort of have the strategy of not loving taking a guy on his first year on a big contract in a new city. I know that's I don't know if that's totally supported by evidence, but it's something that I heard long ago and I've kind of stuck to, and it seems to be sort of working for me. So I'm gonna kind of stick with it if I can help it.
That's an old Rick Wolf and Glenn Colton adage.
Yeah,
and they're really good at what they do. So I'm definitely for me it's not so much a part change. Like I don't think for Seager that I'm worried about like him hitting in that large stadium. For me, it's the health. He's really struggled to stay on the field, and when a guy is somewhat one-dimensional in the way Seager is, because he doesn't run at all, you need him to accumulate, and I just don't feel very confident he's going to accumulate. I think on a per plate appearance basis, I think he's going to be fun. I think he's going to be really good. I just don't know that I can pencil in 600 plate appearances, and that early I want guys who can give me 600 plate appearances. Dave?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if people realize, but I know you said you're not concerned about the park, but I would be. Dodgers Stadium, Chavez Ravine or whatever it's called these days. plays really, really favorable to home runs. 124 park factor on StatCast. Arlington or whatever the Texas park now is
Globe
called.
Life.
Globe Life, thank you. Is under 100. It's like 96 or 98 or something like that. And it's a much worse lineup, and he can't stay healthy. I mean, this guy hasn't had a full season since 2017. He does have legit power. I mean, 115 max EV, 49% hard hit rate, 12.5% barrel rate last year. All looks really good. But even when he was doing that in with the Dodgers last year, like, it was good, not great. And I think he's downgrading his lineup. He doesn't give you any speed, like you mentioned. It's just that plus being a big injury risk. It just all ends up to a no for me. And with Bobby Witt, it'll change dependent on if they say, like, we'll know at some point in spring training if they're going to start with him on the team. If they're not starting with him on the team, he's just a flat no. I'm not willing to hold him. I know that he could be up quickly, but he could also struggle. He could get hurt in the minors. You never know. And then he never ends up coming up, or it comes up months down the road. I'm not holding him. So I think, like you said, he makes more sense in a DC than like a main event or something where you'd have to put him on one of your 7 bench slots. But in general, right now, I'm just not drafting Bobby Witt.
All right. I have not drafted Bobby Witt. I have not come close to drafting Bobby Witt for the reasons you just laid out. If they sign him to a long-term deal prior to the start of the season, and prior to our big drafts, that may change for me, because I do think he can be a really special player this year. I just need to know when he's going to be up in the majors before I'm willing to kind of spend that kind of draft capital. All right, Charlie Morton and Justin Verlander. Morton going around pick 91, Verlander going pick 97. Dave, you've been a Verlander guy for a really long time.
I have been. I've been a Verlander hater for a very long time. No, I mean, I put out a tweet the other day about it, and it's so funny to me that people have kind of forgotten about the fact that when he was going to be pitching in 2020 before Tommy John surgery, he was going to be changing his whole mechanics to try to pitch for, I mean, he claimed another 10 years, but let's be honest, there's no chance that happens. But, he wanted, anytime a guy wants to change his mechanics, and Jeff Zimmerman was doing the breakdown, and when he had, I think it was a lower arm slot or whatever, or higher, I don't remember, it was one or the other, but his K rate went down significantly from like 12.5 to like under 10 or something like that, K per 9. And I don't know what I'm getting with him. And I think people think that because it's been so long since Tommy John, he's just going to come in and be fine. No, he's going to be very rusty, and he's 39 years old, and he's got to stay healthy. I mean, I think it's a long shot to expect more than like 100 innings out of him. And I don't think that those 100 innings are going to be that great. I think people are just overrating him because he's Justin Verlander. When it comes to Charlie Morton, I'm not as concerned because he's not coming off an arm injury. It's a leg injury. But what I am concerned about is that he wasn't able to use the team's facilities during the lockout. So I don't have any updates. I don't know how he's doing. I just saw something recently talking about how he feels like he's close, but not quite ready yet. I mean, it's late February, so he's got about another month. I don't know. Is he going to be ready to go by the start of the season? Is he going to get off to a slow start? Right now, with as little information as I have, he's a soft avoid for me. But if I get some positive news on him, then I'd be back in on him by the time that like main events and stuff come around.
Jenny?
Yeah, I think it's good that we put these two together, because they sort of illustrate to me the difference in evaluating injury risk. So both guys are old. Obviously, like, there's the old stigma there. But I am much more in on Morton than I am in on Verlander, because of the nature of the injury and what it takes to come back from it. Charlie Morton had a broken bone. I'm not generally concerned with broken bones.
Right.
And he may be a little bit behind schedule, but when he pitched last year, he was really good. And yep. I've drafted him at least once, maybe twice so far, and I would do it again. And Verlander, I'm probably not in on unless I have just the right roster set up for it, where I really don't have to rely on him, because it's unlikely that I will have any Verlander.
Yeah, it's unlikely that I'm going to have any Verlander either. I have him ranked outside of my top 50 starting pitchers. And it's because like Dave said, we have no idea what he's going to look like when he comes back. Guys often struggle with command and control coming off of Tommy John. The option in his contract to get him another year in Houston is 130 innings. If he just hits 130 innings, I'm not going to be happy having him as my SP2 or 3. I just think there's so much risk that people are avoiding because people like Justin Verlander.
Yep.
And if first, I want to see him pitch first. I want to see what his command and control looks like. But if he comes out and is pitching well in spring training, he's gonna be a second or third round pick.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I'm just not gonna get him. I'm doing kind of a soft avoid with Morton right now because he's coming off of the injury. If he comes back and he is pitching well, I'll be happy to pay full freight.
Yep.
The last time we saw him, he was limping off the mountain because he broke his leg, and
he struck somebody out with a broken leg.
He's an absolute baller. Like there's no like he is straight boss mode. He was amazing. But you still have to plant on that leg, and that we saw even with like a guy like Soroka, and a different injury. Obviously, this is a break. That was a tear of an Achilles. We saw that you can still have issues down the road with legs being a pitcher because you have to plant on that leg. So something I'm just a little bit skeptical of in my early drafts, but I'm happy to take him once we see him throwing off of a mound in spring training. So, and then we're going to finish off with another one of Dave's favorite, Cody Bellinger, who we've all already said we're avoiding. So I don't think we need to go into that one too much. And Christian Yelich, who is a former first overall pick in fantasy that is now going much, much later. Jenny, what say you on Christian Yelich?
I don't think I can invest because I don't know what's wrong. If there was an explanation for it, I don't even love the explanation for Bellinger that, maybe just is just his shoulder still last year and maybe this year he'll be fine. Okay, maybe. But that seemed like a long drop for him, just for a shoulder. But with Yelich, I don't feel like we know what's wrong. Okay, maybe it was his back, maybe it was his knee or shoulder, but are any of those things any better now than they were? He didn't have surgery to repair anything. So I'm just scared because I don't know what's wrong, so I don't think I can do it.
Yeah. Dave?
So I had Jenny's position until I started really digging into the stats on Yelich. And actually, I came out being very much in, looking to see if I know. I surprised myself. Some of the bigger, luck factors the two biggest ones are BABIP and home run per fly ball rate that I like to look at to see where are they typically at to where they could regress to. First of all, 2020, I'm not gonna say it's all luck because I think he was just really lost, but he made a lot of gains from 2020 to 2021. I mean, his contact rate went from 68 to almost 78%. His zone contact rate from 82 to 86%. His max EV was up 3 miles an hour. He was still hitting the ball hard, but his barrel rate was low, and his launch angle was low. So obviously he needs to make some adjustments there. But the home run per fly ball rate, his career average is 22.5%, and he was at 13.2% last year. And his BABIP was at 321, which sounds high, but for him that's actually low. His career BABIP is 351. So I see him kind of where the projections are putting him. I think they're a little optimistic with his steals. I don't see him stealing 15 to 20 bases. I mean, he could, but I would put him down more towards the 10 to 12 range in steals, with 20 to 25 homers. But I think there's some upside there too, and he has a lot of paths to value. If he gives me any of those things, he could be worth taking where he goes because he's hitting in the middle of a really good lineup. And I know that his back injury is still going to be there. He's going to miss games here and there, but he doesn't really ever miss substantial games. Last year was the first year he really did. He had 117 games, but still, that's a good year for, Buxton. So I really like taking the shot on Yelich around pick 100 this year.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. He's kind of like at the beginning of an injury tier for me in the outfield, and I have yet to pull the trigger on him, largely because one of the things he's doing is putting the ball back on the ground.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that is due to the back. I wonder if I need to really kind of sit down and do kind of a swing analysis, and kind of see, like, is the launch angle, because his launch angle was like under 3 degrees last year.
Yeah.
And that's
not good, right?
Yeah, it's not good, and that's why he's not barreling the ball, because if you don't lift the ball, you can't barrel it. I don't know that. I think he has maybe made a change to his swing in order to compensate for the back. The team said that the back was not an issue last year, which scares me, because then at least it's something to
back injuries never go away. They're always there.
I know this, but
I know this.
Why would I feel? Why would you feel comfortable that things are going to get better? I think that
it's not an injury that's he's not gonna miss 50 games with the back injury. He's gonna miss a couple games here and there, but I'm not overly concerned about that. And I guess, when it comes to the launch angle, my thought is one little adjustment, and he has shown he can be an elite hitter. Elite hitters like Vlad and like Yelich can make those adjustments. I don't have as much confidence that a guy like Yandy Diaz will be able to make that adjustment, but I think yeah, that's how I'm looking at it as an upside play, but I think that the floor is still high enough that at pick 100, it's a fine shot to take.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I haven't, like I said, I have yet to do it. But I think considering where he's going and the other outfielders he's going around, like, there's a lot of red flags in the outfield once you get past like the 15th outfielder, and really inside the top 15 outfielders too, there's a lot of red flags. Yep. So it's kind of picking and choosing what red flags you're willing to take a shot on, and which
like Cedric Mullins, for example.
Yeah, this is it's actually true. I mean, I think people are wrong about those red flags, but like I said, you pick and choose which red flags you like and which ones you don't. So
yep.
Jenny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
It was. You're an awesome analyst, but an even better player. It was great to have you on, and it was just like talking to one of the guys.
Good.
I appreciate you being willing to stay up late for us.
For sure.
I don't want you to stay up any later, so remind everybody where you can reach on social media, and then plug again your work.
Yeah, so on Twitter, I am at Jenny Butler 830. And I am so far only in the FTN 5-tool fantasy draft guide. But hopefully this season you will see me on both Rotoballer and Fantrax.
Absolutely. Awesome. Dave, where can you be reached? What are you working on?
That would be at Run DMCD. And right now I'm just working on not being sick and getting ready for the baseball season. So.
Yep, I that's what I'm working on too, is not being sick. I'm also on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. TGFBI satellite leagues are going strong. You can still sign up for them. Go to tgfbi.com, click satellites, and you can register for those. You can read my written work 5 days a week over on Fangraphs. Hear me on this podcast, TGFBI podcast, and the Sleeper in the Bus podcast. That will do it for this episode.
And check out Earth. Come join us in Earth.
Earth.
Clark's going to win it again, baby.
They are not. For Dave, Jenny, and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic